Hey students, we've got our first test coming up, and a few students have asked if I could give a little bit more clarity on a few of the questions that might be arising on the Canvas portion of the test. You can see the technology portion, so that's pretty clear. So let me open this up for myself, and I'm just going to go through it in case you're kind of wondering how many questions are on the Canvas portion of the test. Remember, you get 2.5 hours. So you've got 15 total questions. Once you click start, the timer is going. There's not multiple opportunities for an exam. There's multiple opportunities for the checkpoints as we go through. So there's only one shot on the test. Make sure that you're kind of ready, dedicated, and you have the time to do it. Again, you have up to 2.5 hours. It doesn't mean you'll take the whole time, but I do provide that amount of time in case it does take you a little longer. I would recommend as you get started on the modules, get started on the test itself, that you maybe open up a few of the tools for yourself. Let me go ahead and show you how to do that right now. Let me share my screen. So before you get started, you'll see something that looks like this. The test will be open on June 24th, tomorrow, and close June 25th at 11:59 p.m. Remember, you have 2.5 hours to complete the exam, but it will close at 11:59 p.m. So in the past, I've had a few students that would start at 11 p.m. Even though it says you have 2.5 hours, the test will end at basically midnight. So make sure you start with enough time to complete it. All right, so now the technology applets are listed under a little link here, the technology resources. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and open that up in a new tab. If you have a Mac, I believe it's Control click. And this provides you, again, this top section here can be used on Canvas timed exams. For this exam, the normal Z distribution applets are the ones that you could use. There's really no reason to have anything else going. The Desmos scientific calculator, totally fine if you don't have a standard scientific calculator. You can use your cell phone if you wanted to. Again, some of you might have a calculator that looks a little bit more like this, just pretty basic. The math I'm going to ask you to do on this is just very basic addition, multiplication, things like that. So nothing, you don't need a graphing calculator, but if you have one and you want to, you can use it. If you don't have one handy, feel free to, again, I will open this in a new tab. So I now have a tab with Desmos Scientific Calculator, so that if I needed to put in a whole bunch of numbers and divide, I could click the little button here and put in 15 plus 23 plus 44 plus 157, and I divide by 4, and the value shows up very quickly right here. Okay, you can press enter. What I love about this calculator is if I made a mistake, I simply click on it and go back and change it to a 47 instead of a 44, and that changes the output right away. So you might also like that calculator. I think it's a good one. It's very quick. For what we're doing, it would probably do everything we need and then more, but this is a quick way to use it. The next three are the normal distribution applets. These have been built into parts of previous modules. This would have been mostly modules 9 and 10, where you would have seen these. So what I do is, again, I right click and I open them in a new tab. I open each one, because whatever question might be asked, if I need to use technology to find it, I can simply go up here and find this. So if I need a cutoff score, I can input one z-score with this applet. For example, I enter a 2.1, I click enter, and I can immediately see the area to the left and to the right. That's pretty quick. The other one is input two z-scores. So that's if I wanted to group between a particular number. So maybe between -1.4 and +1.8, click enter, and I can see each region on the graph: the left side, the central, and the right tail. And the last one that you probably used a couple times in the different components that we've done in this large chunk, the inverse normal distribution. In this one, you enter a percentage and it gives you back a z-score. So remember, the z-score, you type it in, it gives you a percentage. In this one, it goes the other direction. You type a percentage, it gives you a z-score. So I could put in 0.65, press enter, and 65% of the data will be to the left of a z-score of 0.3853. Okay, so if I was about ready to take the test, I would have my test page ready to go. Before I clicked start, I would open up these other tabs at the top, making sure no other tabs are out there. And I can even close down this one at this point in time. I've got my Desmos calculator, my applet for one z-score, two z-scores if I need it, and the inverse normal. So these are all set and ready for me to use. Don't forget, you can have your written or digital notes. That's totally fine. But other websites, resources, and other people, not allowed. So that's the rule that we have. And once you click start, you're agreeing to that student code of conduct. If there's any issues, I'll reach out to you afterwards and kind of try to follow up with you. And let's see here. I think another thing to note is this does include some essay questions. They're not really like essays in an English class sense, but they're more, you have to type a written response or an explanation. So if you have essay questions like that, basically the computer won't automatically grade them, but it'll give you back how many points did you get out of the automatically scored ones. It doesn't give you those other ones. I will go back later once the exam is done. I'll go back and grade those and it will increase your score on the test. Okay, I think that's about it. Let's see here. A few other people have asked, well, do I do corrections? And I do allow some corrections on the Canvas portion. We'll talk about that after the exam is completed. I don't allow corrections on the technology portion because for that one, you have a full week. If there's any issues, you can reach out to me. So I feel like that one's a little bit different in that case. But for this Canvas one, I do allow some correction points for you can go back and say, oh, I missed that. And now I can understand why. All right, let me jump in. I'm going to stop sharing now. And so I'm going to go through the exam portion itself and kind of just talk to you about what kind of questions you should expect. Again, 15 total questions. You have 2.5 hours. Some of them are going to be much quicker than others. Question number one, and again, depending on which version of the test you end up with, it draws from a test bank. So you're all going to get different questions, but you kind of have to tell me which variables are categorical or numerical based on a particular situation. And then you have to do an interpretation. Okay. So an interpretation of data. Question two, this one's one of the bigger questions. It has multiple parts. It talks about things like means and standard deviations on a normal distribution, something we've done quite a bit over modules 9 and 10. And so it describes a situation where a teacher is trying to use a different grading system. And so your job is to find a mean and standard deviation, and then use that to find certain percentiles. And then after that, to take possible z-scores and turn those back into exam scores. So again, each of the steps that we've done along the way, again, if you've been doing all the homework in the modules, it should be pretty consistent with what you've seen before. Following that, there is an essay question where you reflect on what you just did and you answer the question about whether or not you feel the approach is fair and make sure that you explain your conclusion. And I provide a few sample students, and your job is to kind of say what grade would they get under this new system. That's kind of the explanation part. Question 8 is a two-way table. Sometimes a contingency table. So we did one of those with the depression lab where it had different numbers in there. Basically, you'll be asked to create one of those from an image or some data. And then the kind of the follow-up to that one is once you have that two-way table in place, I will ask you some pretty general probability questions. What's the probability of doing blank? What's the probability of blank or blank? What's the probability of blank and blank? So the ors, the ands, the conditional probability with that vertical bar and the condition or given statement. That would definitely be fair game here. Question 6 is kind of a two-parter, so 6 and 7 go together. So I'm going to give you a probability distribution. You have to determine what it's going to take to complete the probability distribution and then find an expected value for that distribution. Again, very similar to what you've done in the previous homework and did I get this check-ins? And then from the probability distribution, you'll choose some drop downs to try to say which of these would be typical, which of these would not be typical based on that probability distribution. And do try to remember that on this test, sometimes there are drop downs for multiple choice. Other times there is just a type a number in the box. And make sure you read carefully because it'll say keep all the decimal places, or it might say round to 2 decimal places. So make sure you follow those rounding tips so that you can make sure the answer matches. Then I've got question 8, talks about something that is normally distributed. I provide for you a mean and a standard deviation, and your job is to figure out what is the probability that a certain data value is bigger than a number, less than a number, something along those lines. Question 9 is where I do ask you to do a computation. So I will give you a set of data values, either a list of data values, depending on which question you get, or maybe a dot plot where you can see exactly which number it is. I try to keep this to be a very small set of data. So 3, 6, 9, maybe 10, 11 numbers, like that's as high as I go. I don't think I do. Maybe I'll do 12, but that's like it. We're not talking about 20 or 50. So I'm going to ask you to find the mean. I'm going to ask you to find the 5-number summary. You should know what those are. And I'm going to ask you for the interquartile range. So again, remember, we're using the techniques that we showed in class, especially for things like medians, where we kind of split the data in half and then find the medians of the up and down to get those quartiles. And then I'll ask you a follow-up question that talks about a what if. So what if I did this thing? And in that case, I'm not going to ask you to recalculate everything, but you should be able to tell me if the mean, median, standard deviation, if they go up, go down, or stay the same. If I add a point or take a point away, you should be able to look at that and kind of say, I don't have to recompute it. I can understand what's happening. There's a follow-up on that talks about an explanation. So again, if I give you a dot plot or a set of data, I might ask you something about the word outlier. What would it mean to be an outlier in this situation? So make sure you have that down, perhaps in your notes. Next up is an application problem that we saw in 3 different components in different modules. I'll ask you some specific questions. In this case, most of them are probably going to be true-false questions. Again, those will be kind of a drop-down. You just select which answer works. I've got another one where you have to select all the statements that must be true about specific information. I will provide you with 5-number summaries on something like maybe a drug and treatment and a placebo. And so you have to kind of look and determine things based on that 5-number summary. And we kind of finish up here. Question 13 talks about observational studies, cause and effect relationships. You have to answer some questions. They're going to be in drop downs for this, but the goal is that you kind of want to complete the sentences as you're reading it with the statement that would kind of complete that thought. That's question 13. Question 14 is very similar, although this one is more about collecting information, the different types of surveys we might have, how can we draw valid conclusions, and talking about random sampling, random selection. The last question on the test, question number 15, is a question where I ask you to interpret the meaning of a mathematical expression. In this case, it will be something related to conditional probability. So I will give you a mathematical expression, and then I ask you to take the words there and turn them into sentences that someone who's not in the class can actually understand what's going on. Okay. So overall, if you're kind of looking for, well, wait a minute, what's going on? How many essay questions? So from what I just said, you have a total of 3 essay style questions. The exam itself, I think, again, for the most part on this first test, people tend to get it done around 90 minutes or so. If it takes you longer, that's okay. That's why the extra time is there. If you finish up quicker, maybe go back and read over everything just to be sure. Okay. All right. Hopefully that helps. I'm going to send this out in an announcement, and I wish you the best. If you do have a question on the take home, which is the technology portion, just reach out. I've jumped into Zoom with almost 2/3 of the class so far individually, and it seems to help at times. If you're getting stuck on something with RStudio, the web apps, or anything, just let me know. I'll meet up with you because I really want you to succeed this term. So take care, have a great night, and I look forward to an awesome test, and we'll see you next week.